So, Jason Voorhees is one of the most iconic characters in all of horror. He has haunted drive-in cinemas for generations, looming about the shores of Crystal Lake in the hopes of snatching up unsuspecting camp counselors. Therefore, with as much time as we've spent with him, you think you probably know everything, right? Well, apparently wrong, because there are so many air quotes facts that people just assume are true that really aren't. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 things everyone always gets wrong about Jason Voorhees. Number 10. He's the killer from the first movie. Friday the 13th, a classic 1980s slasher flick about a group of teenagers who stay at Camp Crystal Lake during the summer only to be systematically picked off by the masked maniac Jason Voorhees. That's the plot, isn't it? Well, no. Like the fatal mistake that Drew Barrymore made in the opening of Scream, the killer in the very first movie is not Jason, but his mother, Pamela Voorhees, played by the late Betsy Palmer. Jason does appear in a minor way, seen drowning as a young boy during flashbacks and for the brief jump scare at the end, but it's a far cry from how he's presented in later movies. Jason's minimal screen time here may be surprising for first-time viewers. I mean, he's the star of the franchise that everyone recognizes, but he doesn't get a major role until the second film. For the first two acts, the movie keeps its killer silent and unseen, filming much of the action from her point of view. Mrs. Voorhees isn't introduced until the third act, so it fails as a whodunit, but Palmer definitely makes up for it with her memorable performance. What speaks to Jason's strength as a character is that he emerged as one of the most famous movie monsters of all time, despite having such a small role during the first installment. Number 9. He's had the mask from the beginning. While the goalie mask is certainly his definitive look, we've already established that Jason's appearance in the original Friday was as a young boy in the lake with his face out in the open. So what's just as surprising is that in the second film, with Jason elevated to the role of the slasher villain, he still doesn't have his mask. Instead, he wears a sack over his head, earning this iteration the creative nickname of Baghead Jason. It wasn't until the third film that Jason finally got hold of the mask that would then come to define him. He took it from the character Shelley, a lonely guy who plays pranks on the rest of the group to try and make them notice him. After Shelley terrifies his crush by leaping out of the lake wearing the mask, Jason dispatches him and takes it for himself, finally appearing on screen the way that we all expect him to. During the climax, final girl Chris lands an axe to Jason's head, cracking the mask, a detail which remains throughout the rest of the series. While he's had this look for most of the franchise, it took all of the original trilogy to form Jason into the character we all know now. Number 8. He's a Michael Myers ripoff. Another cinematic giant when it comes to silent, unstoppable slasher villains is Halloween's Michael Myers. The 1978 John Carpenter classic redefined horror, introducing many of the slasher film conventions that we now take for granted. It has stood the test of time and is often heralded as one of the greatest horror movies ever made. The comparisons between Michael and Jason are understandable. They both cover their faces, never speak, and refuse to let serious injury or even death stop them in their bloody quests. However, underneath the masks, the two are very different beasts. Jason invites sympathy from the viewer, a child bullied for being different who met a rather watery fate in Crystal Lake due to the camp counselor's negligence. Having somehow survived this traumatic incident, he then witnessed his own mother decapitated by another counselor. His distaste for those who organize scout camps and school trips kind of makes sense, even if it does take things way too far. Michael, on the other hand, decided to murder his own sister when he was 6 years old for no apparent reason. He was institutionalized, then escaped years later to return to his hometown and hunt down innocent babysitters. He also eats a dog at one point. While Friday the 13th is blatantly and admittedly inspired by Halloween, Michael and Jason go in very different directions as characters. The similarities are literally just skin deep. Number 7. He carries a chainsaw. We all know that moment in The Simpsons where Bart is anxiously laying awake in bed, anticipating Sideshow Bob to strike when Homer just ignorantly bursts in yelling, "Bart, do you want to see my new chainsaw and hockey mask?" This is a combination commonly associated with Jason, appearing in loads of pop culture references, even in a Diary of the Wimpy Kid, of all things. Yet, throughout his 12 movies and licensed books, comics, and video games, the character has never once wielded a chainsaw. Growing up in the woods, far from civilization, he wouldn't exactly be the most mechanically minded minded guy. He's far more comfortable with machetes, axes, and occasional brute force. He's a simple man, if not a peaceful one. The only time that he uses a motorized tool is in the notoriously censored Part 7, The New Blood, where he accosts a psychiatrist with a weed killer. He tried it once and discovered it wasn't his thing, returning to his usual methods soon after. We can only speculate where this image of Jason as a psychotic lumberjack came from, and perhaps it's the Mandela effect, or people just confusing him with Leatherface. Whatever the case, this perception doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Number 6. His motif is ch-ch-ch, ha-ha-ha, ch-ch-ch, ha-ha-ha. Sounds so weird when you do it out loud. Harry Manfredini's score created the perfect creepy atmosphere for the first movie and was so successful that he returned to score the majority of the sequels. The music is part of the franchise's iconography as much as Jason's hockey mask and the shimmering surface of Crystal Lake. The hook of the piece is the whispery vocals, chanting something like ch-ch-ch, ha-ha-ha. Now, it might sound like abstract noises to unease the viewer, but this motif has a specific meaning. During the climax of the first film, as a maniac Pamela Voorhees chases after final girl Alice, she talks to herself with the persona of her lost son. Putting on an eerie infantile voice, she urges, "Kill her, mummy, kill her!" to motivate herself into a vengeful fury. The score's vocals are the voice of Manfredini chanting in a low, breathy tone, "Kill, kill, kill, mum, mum, mum," echoing Mrs. Voorhees' unsettling self-talk. As Pamela is killed and her son takes over for the sequels, the motif remains, arguably becoming more associated with Jason than it ever was with his mother. In this way, its meaning has become slightly muddled, but it's now impossible to separate Jason from this legendary horror score. Number 5. He's always been an immortal zombie. One of the biggest mysteries in Friday the 13th is just what Jason Voorhees is exactly. The first movie is pretty grounded, with no supernatural elements, until after Mrs. Voorhees has been vanquished and all seems peaceful, the rotted corpse of the young Jason leaps out of the lake, pulling Alice out of her canoe and into the depths below. It's a brilliant cliffhanger that should have been built upon in the next film, but the sequel instead opts to introduce an eyebrow-raising retcon, in that he didn't drown, he made it to shore and lived alone in the woods, before being then brought out of hiding to avenge his mother's beheading, which he supposedly witnessed. Not only does this make minimal sense, it also blunts the impact of that final jump scare, and it makes Mrs. Voorhees' motivation kind of moot. It's a tough pill to swallow, but one you've got to accept for the sake of adult Jason taking center stage. For the next 3 movies, he was less of an undead monster that couldn't be killed and more of an unstoppable brute that was just really, really hard to kill. His death in the final chapter was supposed to be definitive, but in the 6th film, he is accidentally reanimated with a bolt of lightning, Frankenstein style. From that point on, he was officially an immortal zombie. Number 4. His powers have never really been explained. Jason's timeline is kind of messy. He drowned as a child, except he didn't, lived in the woods for years before seeing his mum's head being lopped off, somehow developed superhuman strength, stature, and durability, which he used to continue her string of violent anti-counselor fervor. Then he was killed and accidentally reanimated years later by the very man who killed him. Needless to say, there are some gaps in logic here, which director Adam Marcus attempted to bridge in 1993 with Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. This movie begins with Jason being blown to pieces by a small army during a sting operation, but as ever, this doesn't keep him down for very long. His physical form completely destroyed, he appears in his spirit form, a parasitic, demonic worm that hops between bodies, turning each host into an embodiment of Jason. The Final Friday presents this body-hopping creature as Jason's true essence, what's kept him alive and strong all of these years, no matter how much damage he takes. The film gets little love from the fan base, with many feeling the explanation of Jason's powers was unnecessary and misguided. Fans were also disappointed by the very little screen time that classic Jason got. Perhaps gaps in the canon are preferable to bizarre retcons and explanations. Number 3. He's afraid of water. He wasn't a very good swimmer, Miss Voorhees tells her terror-stricken Alice as she explains the tragedy that caused her to begin her vendetta. Since Jason's drowning, but not drowning, his mastery over the waves seems to have improved greatly. He can be seen in Part 4 attacking from underneath a dinghy, so it's safe to say that he's willing to submerge himself in Crystal Lake, despite his near-death experience, and move about underwater with ease. In Friday the 13th, the game, players can take Jason into the waters, where he can dart around at rapid speeds and catch swimmers like the shark from Jaws. He's practically an aquatic mammal. A major change was made in Freddy vs. Jason, which Freddy Krueger torments Jason with water. At the sight of water, Jason will now crumble into a mess, reduced to that bullied boy desperately slashing about in Crystal Lake, trying to stay afloat. This could have made sense that Jason had developed a fear of water due to his childhood trauma had it been established in previous films. The problem is that it hadn't. It seems to have been introduced by the screenwriters Damian Shannon and Mark Swift as a way for the Springwood slasher to have an edge on his opponent, as if they weren't evenly matched already. Number 2. He kills indiscriminately. How could an undead serial killer with a triple-figure body count possibly have anything close to a moral code? Well, it's not that exactly, but Jason is pickier than you might expect when it comes to slicing and dicing. Camp counselors were the reason for his drowning and the death of his mother, so he has a rather vilified view of them. Despite his best efforts, people keep applying for that same bloody position at Camp Crystal Lake. Perhaps the biggest mystery in the franchise is why people keep showing up there. There have been occasions that Jason has killed people regardless of their relation to the camp management, but that usually comes down to his territorial animal instincts. The film that best showcased Jason's boundaries is Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, in which he chooses to scare off a group of kids by showing them his gruesome face rather than killing them. In another scene, he inadvertently saves the main character Rennie by killing 2 criminals that are assaulting her. There was also a scene in the script that would have had Jason kick a dog, but the actor Kane Hodder refused to shoot it because he felt that it wasn't in character. Jason is definitely a monster, but he doesn't torment innocents with the same wicked glee as somebody like Freddy Krueger does. And number 1, he has no personality. Just because he hides his face and never talks, it doesn't mean that Jason Voorhees is a one-dimensional character. Audiences can feel for him as a tormented soul who lost his innocence after years of bullying and trauma, while also fearing his unstoppable brutality. The boundaries of those he chooses to kill and those he spares raises questions about his humanity, and his Oedipus complex makes him ripe for psychological analysis. His hidden face means that he can be played by different actors between films, and Jason has been played by a total of 8 actors, all of whom have a slightly different take on him. From the scruffy, stumbling baghead Jason to Kane Hodder's heaving, towering menace, the character provides a valuable opportunity for actors to express their range by exploring how they feel a character like this might think and act. It takes genuine talent to craft an expressive performance while wearing that mask. If Jason Voorhees was a boring character with no personality, then he wouldn't have become the icon of horror that he is today. His fan base is huge and he resonates throughout pop culture. At every Comic-Con, you'll see at least one Jason cosplay, and his mask has been printed onto t-shirts around the world. He may not be quotable like Freddy, but he is just as compelling. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 things that everybody always gets wrong about Jason Voorhees. I hope you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice, where I do all of my streaming outside of work, and it'd be great to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself well with love and respect, my friend, because you deserve all of the best things in life, all right? I am like a serial killer of positivity. I am coming into your lives, and I'm making you realize that you are a massive ledge, and do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise, alright? Now go out there and absolutely smash your life goals today. I believe in ya. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.